All right, let's go. Number 10. The Pyramid Precision Problem. The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. That number is almost impossible to appreciate until you understand what it means in practice. A margin of error smaller than many modern surveying instruments can achieve. No blueprint survives. No tool has been identified that could have produced it. And no inscription anywhere on the Giza Plateau explains how it was done. Every major civilization leaves behind a record of its engineering development, early mistakes, iterative improvements, the slow accumulation of technique across generations. Egypt's pyramid building tradition does show progression in some respects. But the Great Pyramid, built around 2560 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, represents the peak of that tradition, not its culmination. It came first. Its four base sides deviate from a perfect square by less than 58 millimeters across a 230-meter span. The base is level to within 2.1 centimeters across its entirety. In 2017, engineer and Egyptologist Glenn Dash, working through the Glenn Dash Research Foundation, proposed the most credible current hypothesis for the North Alignment: a shadow clock method using the autumn equinox. The method is elegant and theoretically achievable with ancient tools, but it has never been experimentally replicated at the scale required, and it does not explain the leveling. It does not explain how granite blocks weighing up to 80 tons were cut and dressed to tolerances that would satisfy a modern infrastructure engineer using copper tools that materials science tells us were insufficient for the task. The engineering anomaly at Giza is not a fringe claim. It is an open question sitting at the center of mainstream archaeology, documented and unresolved. The leading explanations account for individual elements of the achievement while leaving others without a credible mechanism. No single theory explains everything. The precision is real. The method remains unknown. What was built at Giza in the 3rd millennium BCE should not have been buildable. The tolerances achieved that morning, and it must have taken many mornings, represent a standard of practice that the civilization surrounding it cannot fully account for. Number 9. The Missing Mummies of the Pyramid Builders. The Great Pyramid was built to be a tomb. That is the foundational assumption of Egyptology, the premise upon which an enormous body of scholarship rests. The King's Chamber, carved from red Aswan granite deep within the pyramid's core, contains a single uninscribed sarcophagus, lidless, undecorated, and empty. No mummy has ever been recovered from it. No grave goods, no cartouche, not one confirmed funerary object in the structure designed to be the most elaborate burial in human history. Every other major pharaonic pyramid contains at minimum some trace of its intended occupant. Inscriptions, shabtis, canopic remains, the residue of ritual. The Pyramid of Unas at Saqqara is covered in pyramid texts. The burial chamber of Amenhotep II yielded royal mummies. Even damaged and robbed tombs leave evidence of their original purpose. Mark Lehner of Harvard University and the Ancient Egypt Research Associates, whose team has conducted the most comprehensive archaeological mapping of the Giza Plateau to date, has confirmed that no burial evidence has been recovered from the pyramid's interior chambers. In 2017, the picture became stranger. The Scan Pyramids project, led by Mehdi Tayyubi of the HIP Institute and physicist Kunihiro Morishima of Nagoya University, used muon tomography to peer inside the pyramid without excavation. Muons, subatomic particles produced by cosmic ray interactions in the upper atmosphere, pass through dense stone and can reveal internal voids the way X-rays reveal bone. While what they found, published in the journal Nature, was a large void above the Grand Gallery, estimated at approximately 30 meters in length. Its architectural purpose has not been determined. Mainstream Egyptology maintains the tomb was robbed in antiquity, a well-documented pattern across pharaonic burial sites. The only inscription linking the structure to Khufu at all is a worker's graffito reading "Friends of Khufu," found by Howard Weiss in 1837 in a sealed relieving chamber above the king's chamber. One piece of graffiti, one empty sarcophagus, one unexplained void detected 2 centuries later by instruments that read the interior through cosmic radiation. Something was built here with extraordinary intent. Whether it was a tomb is a question the pyramid itself has never definitively answered, and the newly detected void above the Grand Gallery suggests the building still has not finished offering its surprises. Number 8. The Age of the Sphinx, Water Erosion, and the Rogue Geology. The Great Sphinx sits on the Giza Plateau, ringed by its own enclosure, a rectangular trench cut into the bedrock from which the statue itself was carved. The walls of that enclosure are deeply weathered. In 1992, geologist Robert Schoch of Boston University presented findings to the Geological Society of America that reframed the nature of that weathering. The erosion patterns, Schoch argued, were not the shallow horizontal striations produced by wind and sand. They were deep, undulating vertical channels. The signature of water. Wind erosion is the expected mechanism at Giza. The plateau sits at the edge of the Sahara Desert and has been subjected to aeolian weathering, erosion driven by airborne sand particles, for thousands of years. That weathering pattern is visible everywhere on the plateau. But the undulating vertical channels in the Sphinx enclosure walls are characteristic of prolonged, heavy rainfall runoff, a precipitation pattern consistent with a wetter climate regime. The paleoclimate record is unambiguous on this point. The last time heavy rainfall fell on Giza at the scale required to produce that erosion was during the African humid period, which ended approximately 5,000 years ago and peaked roughly 11,000 years ago. The conventional date for the Sphinx's construction is approximately 2,500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, placing it firmly in the dynastic period, well after the Green Sahara's rainfall had ceased. If Schoch's identification of the erosion mechanism is correct, the Sphinx was already ancient when Khafre came to power. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass, formerly Secretary-General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, and geologist K. Lalgauri have challenged Schoch's interpretation, attributing the erosion to salt weathering and differential rock hardness. The debate has continued for 3 decades without resolution. Schoch's hypothesis is not accepted by mainstream Egyptology, but it has not been definitively disproven either. The geology of the Sphinx enclosure remains a contested landscape, and the erosion patterns that started this argument are still there, carved into the rock, waiting for an explanation that satisfies everyone. If the Sphinx is older than dynastic Egypt, then whoever built it belongs to a civilization that history has not yet named. Number 7. The Dendera Light, Electricity in the Ancient World. On the walls of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a Ptolemaic period sanctuary constructed in the final decades before the Common Era, around 50 to 30 BCE. A series of stone relief carvings depict objects that have no agreed-upon parallel in any other known religious iconography. An elongated bulb-shaped form, a serpent within, connected in some interpretations to a pillar that Egyptian religion associated with power and stability. In 1966, Austrian electrical engineer Walter Garn examined the relief and proposed something that the archaeological establishment immediately and firmly rejected. that the image depicted an electric discharge lamp. The standard Egyptological interpretation is secure and well documented. The lotus flower is one of the most pervasive symbols in Egyptian religious art, representing creation and emergence from the primordial waters. The serpent within the lotus is equally standard, a representation of divine power and transformation. The Djed pillar to which the object is connected in the relief is a common Egyptian religious symbol, appearing in hundreds of contexts. Mainstream archaeology sees a devotional image and nothing more. What makes the Dendera relief genuinely puzzling is not the mainstream interpretation, which is coherent, but the specificity of the alternative one. The object's proportions, the internal serpent's position, the filament-like connection at the base. Garn's team reportedly constructed a physical replica based on the relief's dimensions and, connected to a Van de Graaff generator, produced a glow discharge phenomenon. This demonstration has not been documented in peer-reviewed literature, and no physical evidence of electrical infrastructure, wiring, conductive materials, generation equipment, or burned residue consistent with electrical discharge has been found anywhere at Dendera. The Baghdad battery, an electrochemical cell discovered in 1936 and dating to somewhere between 250 BCE and the early centuries of the Common Era, demonstrates that simple electricity generation was not physically impossible in the ancient world. Its function remains debated, but its existence establishes a boundary. The Dendera relief remains officially classified as religious mythology. The alternative interpretation remains officially fringe. What no one has fully explained is why this particular mythological image looks, with such specificity, like something else entirely. Number 6. The Osireion and the problem of style. Buried beneath the temple of Seti I at Abydos, approximately 160 kilometers northwest of Luxor in Upper Egypt, lies a structure that does not fit. Its formal excavation began in 1902 and 1903, led by Egyptologists Margaret Murray and Flinders Petrie, and was comprehensively described by Henri Frankfurt in his 1933 publication, The Cenotaph of Seti I at Abydos. The structure they found is known as the Osireion. It is built from monolithic granite and limestone blocks so massive, estimated in some cases at 50 to 100 tons, that the engineering required to place them is comparable to the Old Kingdom's most ambitious construction projects, not the New Kingdom temple directly above it. Seti I ruled during the New Kingdom approximately 1279 BCE. His other monuments, temples at Abydos, Karnak, and his tomb in the Valley of the Kings, are richly inscribed and decorated, exemplifying the ornate visual language of their period. The Osireion shares none of these characteristics. It is austere to the point of anachronism. Its walls bear minimal inscription. Its construction style, Cyclopean granite megaliths assembled without mortar at extraordinary precision, belongs to an architectural vocabulary associated with the Old Kingdom or earlier, not with New Kingdom building practice. The conventional Egyptological position dates the Osireion to Seti I, based on a cartouche found in an antechamber adjacent to the primary structure. Mainstream Egyptology interprets the building's unusual style as deliberate archaism, an intentional homage to older architectural traditions, perhaps connecting Seti I to the deep religious heritage of Osiris worship at Abydos. This explanation is reasonable. A minority of researchers, noting that the cartouche was found in an antechamber rather than the primary structure, argue it constitutes insufficient evidence to date the building itself. The Osireion sits below the current water table. Visiting it today requires active pumping. Its foundation level is so far beneath the New Kingdom temple above it that some researchers have proposed it predates that temple not by design intention but by geological necessity. That it was already ancient and partially buried when Seti I built above it. An architectural anomaly this significant, sitting this far beneath a documented historical structure, deserves more certainty than a single cartouche in an adjacent room can provide. Number 5. The radiocarbon dating discrepancy. In 2001, a team of physicists and archaeologists published results in the peer-reviewed journal Radiocarbon that introduced a quiet but persistent challenge to the accepted chronology of ancient Egypt. The study, led by Georges Bonani and colleagues, applied radiocarbon dating to organic material, charcoal, and wood ash embedded in the mortar of Old Kingdom pyramid structures across the Giza Plateau. The dates the samples returned were older than the textbook said, not by decades, in some cases by centuries. Radiocarbon dating works by measuring the decay of carbon-14 in organic material. It is a well-established technique with known limitations. The Bonani study, built on earlier foundational work by Mark Lehner and Herbert Haas, published in the journal MDAIK in 1985, which represented the first systematic radiocarbon sampling of the Giza Plateau. Both studies returned a consistent pattern. Multiple samples from Old Kingdom pyramid structures dated 100 to 400 years earlier than the conventional Egyptological chronology would predict. The research team did not claim the pyramids were necessarily older than believed. They proposed the most scientifically responsible available explanation: the old wood problem. Builders reusing ancient timber, beams, scaffolding, fuel that had been harvested long before construction began would cause the carbon date to reflect the tree's age rather than the structure's construction date. It is a known confounding factor in archaeological radiocarbon dating, and it is plausible. What makes it insufficient as a complete explanation is the consistency of the offset across dozens of samples collected from different locations across the plateau. A systematic bias of this regularity across this many independent samples is difficult to attribute entirely to the reuse of old wood. The old wood problem should produce variable, scattered offsets, not a coherent directional shift of 100 to 400 years across an entire archaeological complex. Additional testing with better controlled organic samples has not yet been undertaken at the scale required to resolve the discrepancy definitively. The radiocarbon evidence is not fringe. It is peer-reviewed, reproducible, and published in a leading scientific journal. It simply does not agree with the dates the textbooks print. That disagreement has never been fully resolved, and the silence surrounding it is more unsettling than any wild theory could be. Number 4. The Libyan desert glass and the impact event. Scattered across a 6,500 square kilometer field straddling the Egyptian-Libyan border in the Great Sand Sea lies one of the strangest materials on Earth. It is pale yellow, almost pure silica, and formed only when sand is flash-heated to temperatures exceeding 1,600 degrees Celsius. Lightning strikes cannot produce it at this scale. Volcanic activity cannot explain it here. The only known natural processes capable of generating those temperatures across a surface area this large are a meteorite impact or an atmospheric airburst. The material is called Libyan desert glass. It is approximately 28 million years old, confirmed through fission track and thermoluminescence dating. And Tutankhamun wore a piece of it around his neck. In 1996, Italian mineralogist Vincenzo de Michele identified a carved scarab at the center of Tutankhamun's pectoral jewelry as Libyan desert glass, not yellow chalcedony as previously assumed. The identification was subsequently confirmed by geologist Luigi Folco of the University of Siena and colleagues, published in Meteoritics and Planetary Science in 2011. The scarab was carved from a piece of extraterrestrial glass, transported hundreds of kilometers across the desert, shaped by craftsmen who understood its rarity, and placed at the center of a pharaoh's most sacred ornament. Ancient Egyptians did not stumble across it accidentally. They sought it out. Despite extensive survey of the LDG field, no confirmed impact crater has been found. The absence of a crater led researchers including Mario Di Martino to propose an atmospheric airburst as the formation mechanism, an event analogous to the 1908 Tunguska explosion over Siberia, but orders of magnitude more powerful. In 2013, a team led by Jan Kramers of the University of Johannesburg published findings in Earth and Planetary Science Letters describing the Hypatia stone, a pebble recovered from within the LDG field, with a chemical composition unlike any known meteorite type. The comet nucleus interpretation proposed by Kramers has been contested in subsequent literature, and the Hypatia stone's origin remains genuinely unresolved. What is confirmed is this: 28 million years ago, something struck or detonated above what is now Egypt with sufficient energy to flash melt thousands of square kilometers of desert into glass. What that event was has not been determined. Whether it left a crater that remains undiscovered or whether it was an airburst that left no crater to find is unknown. Ancient Egyptians collected the result of a cosmic catastrophe, carried it across the desert, and enthroned it at the heart of royal ritual, suggesting they understood on some level that what they held had fallen from somewhere beyond the world they knew. Number 3. The ancient nuclear hypothesis, vitrification, and the fires that shouldn't exist. On July 16, 1945, the detonation of the first nuclear device at Trinity Test Site in White Sands, New Mexico, produced a distinctive material. The intense heat of the explosion, temperatures reaching millions of degrees at the fireball's core, flash fused the desert sand beneath it into a thin layer of green glass. Scientists named it trinitite. It forms at approximately 1,470 degrees Celsius through rapid surface fusion. It is unusual, it is identifiable, and it is not supposed to exist anywhere in the ancient world. Yet layers of fused, glassy material with no confirmed conventional explanation have been reported at multiple ancient occupation sites across the broader region, and the question of how they formed has not been cleanly answered. The site most frequently cited in this context is Mohenjo-Daro in modern Pakistan, a major Indus Valley civilization center excavated beginning in the 1920s. A layer of fused black stone at the site's uppermost occupation level was noted during those early excavations. Mainstream archaeology attributes it to large cooking or industrial fires, which is the scientifically appropriate default explanation. Radiation surveys of Mohenjo-Daro have not confirmed anomalous radioactivity, and the ancient nuclear interpretation of that specific site lacks peer-reviewed support. What is documented and less easily dismissed is a broader geographic pattern of vitrified surface material appearing at ancient sites in layers corresponding to periods of sudden occupation collapse across multiple unconnected locations. The nuclear interpretation of these anomalies is theoretical. It must be stated clearly and held carefully. No peer-reviewed study has confirmed ancient nuclear activity at any archaeological site. Claims of anomalous radioactivity in India's Rajasthan region, often repeated in alternative literature, have not been independently verified in the scientific record. The ancient texts of the Mahabharata and Ramayana contain literary descriptions of weapons producing light, heat, and mass casualties on a devastating scale. These are literary documents, not physical evidence. They are cultural artifacts, not proof. What remains after all appropriate caution is applied is a set of physical anomalies: vitrified layers at ancient sites, collapse events without fully documented causes, materials whose formation temperatures exceed what open fires reliably achieve, that mainstream archaeology has generally explained individually, site by site, without producing a comprehensive account of the pattern they collectively form. The nuclear hypothesis is not science, but the anomalies that inspired it are real. The temperatures required to produce them are specific, and the explanations offered for each individual instance have not always survived scrutiny at every site where the question has been carefully asked. Number 2. The astronomical alignment of Egypt's sacred geography. When the 3 pyramids of Giza are mapped from above and compared against a simulation of the night sky as it appeared over Egypt in approximately 10,500 BCE, using standard astronomical precession calculations that are not in dispute, they align with geometric precision to the 3 belt stars of Orion: Al-Natak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. The slight offset of the 3rd pyramid, Menkars, matches the slight offset of the star Mintaka from the other 2 with a correspondence that is documentable and reproducible. The Great Sphinx, positioned to the east of the pyramids and facing due east, aligns with the point on the horizon where the constellation Leo rose at the same precessional epoch. These are not the alignments of 2500 BCE. They are the alignments of a sky that existed 8,000 years before Khufu was born. The Orion correlation theory was formally proposed by researcher Robert Bauval in a 1989 paper published in Discussions in Egyptology, later expanded in the 1994 book The Orion Mystery. Its central claim, that the Giza pyramid layout intentionally mirrors Orion's belt, rests on a geometric correspondence that even its critics acknowledge is real. The dispute is not about the mathematics, it is about intentionality and about the epoch. Archaeoastronomer Ed Krupp of the Griffith Observatory published a significant rebuttal in Sky and Telescope in 1997, noting that the ground plan must be inverted south to north to match the star positions, an objection that the mainstream rightly takes seriously. Juan Antonio Belmonte of the Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias has published peer-reviewed work arguing that Egyptian pyramid alignments more consistently reflect circumpolar star orientations than the Orion belt correlation. The mainstream objections are legitimate and must be part of any honest account of this theory. And yet the Egyptian religious texts themselves, the pyramid texts, among the oldest religious writings in existence, repeatedly and explicitly identify the pharaoh's afterlife destination as the Duat, the celestial region associated with Orion and Sirius. The stars were not incidental to Egyptian religion. They were its architecture. The question is not whether Egyptians cared about Orion. They demonstrably did. The question is whether the care began in 2500 BCE or much earlier. The precessional epoch of 10,500 BCE is a mathematical fact. Earth's axial wobble, known as precession of the equinoxes, causes the night sky to shift over a 26,000-year cycle. Software that models this shift is built on centuries of verified astronomical calculation. Run it backward, and the sky of 10,500 BCE is recoverable with precision. Whether the builders of Giza designed for that sky is a question about intent, not mathematics. What is most unsettling about the astronomical alignment evidence is not any single claim, but the convergence. A geometric ground plan corresponding to a specific precessional epoch, a sphinx facing a specific celestial alignment at that same epoch, and a religious tradition explicitly organized around those same stars. The mathematics does not require interpretation. The convergence does not require exaggeration. It simply requires an explanation that mainstream scholarship has not yet universally agreed upon, and its implications, if the alignment is intentional, place the conception of the Giza complex thousands of years before the civilization we credit with building it. Number 1. The knowledge discontinuity. Where did Egypt's civilization come from? Every major civilization in the human record follows the same developmental pattern. It begins simply, with rough tools, elementary structures, rudimentary writing, and basic organizational systems. Over centuries and millennia, complexity accumulates. The archaeological record of that accumulation is visible, traceable, and internally consistent. Mesopotamia's cuneiform script evolved through documented stages over hundreds of years before reaching maturity. China's early writing systems show a clear developmental sequence. Rome grew from a collection of villages. The pattern of gradual emergence is so universal that historians and archaeologists treat it as a basic feature of how human societies work. Ancient Egypt does not follow this pattern. It appears in the record almost fully formed. The pre-dynastic period in Egypt spans roughly 6,000 to 3,100 BCE. At approximately 3,100 BCE, under the ruler Narmer, the first dynasty was established and Egypt entered history. Within roughly 500 years of that transition, by the fourth dynasty, around 2600 BCE, Egypt had produced the Great Pyramid of Giza, its largest structure, its most precisely engineered monument, and its most astronomically sophisticated construction. It did not build up to the Great Pyramid. It built the Great Pyramid and then, measurably and documentably, declined. The pyramids that followed it used rubble, fill cores, rather than the solid limestone and granite construction of Giza. They were smaller, less precise, and structurally inferior. The peak came first. The Egyptian language presents a related anomaly. While pre-dynastic markings exist, a fully confirmed developmental sequence comparable to those documented for Sumerian cuneiform or Chinese script has not been established. The writing system appears with a sophistication that has prompted genuine discussion among linguists and Egyptologists. Not fringe theorists, but credentialed scholars working within conventional frameworks. Historian John Romer, in his 2012 work, A History of Ancient Egypt, documents the abruptness of the Old Kingdom transition while maintaining a conventional interpretive framework. The abruptness is not a fringe observation. It is a feature of the mainstream record that the mainstream has not fully explained. Egypt's own religious tradition remembered this anomaly. The concept of Zep Tepi, the first time, appears across the pyramid texts and other ancient Egyptian religious documents. It describes a golden age before recorded history, a period when divine beings walked the earth and established the principles upon which all subsequent civilization was built. Ancient Egyptians did not believe their civilization had emerged gradually from primitive origins. They believed they were the inheritors of something older, something greater, something lost. They encoded that belief in their most sacred texts. Mainstream Egyptology generally reads Zep Tepi as mythology, as origin narrative rather than historical memory. That may be correct, but it is also the interpretation most convenient for a historical framework that has no place for what the texts describe. The mainstream explanation for Egypt's rapid emergence is coherent and evidenced. A combination of Nile Valley resource concentration, elite competition between pre-dynastic chiefdoms, and administrative consolidation under early dynastic rulers produced a civilization capable of extraordinary achievement within a historically compressed time frame. This is not an unreasonable account. It is supported by genuine archaeology. but it struggles with the specific character of what emerged, not just a capable civilization, but one that achieved, at its very first appearance in the monumental record, a standard of precision engineering and astronomical knowledge that it never again equaled and that we still cannot fully replicate or explain. There are gaps in the archaeological record that the Nile itself may be responsible for. Millennia of silt deposits across the delta, sites submerged by fluctuating water levels, regions never excavated. What those gaps contain, if anything, is unknown, but the knowledge discontinuity, the stubborn, documented, peer-reviewed fact that ancient Egypt appeared at a level of sophistication inconsistent with its known developmental history, is not a mystery invented by alternative researchers. It is a problem sitting at the center of conventional scholarship, acknowledged in measured academic language, and set aside rather than solved. Ancient Egypt built things we cannot build. It knew things we cannot fully account for. It remembered a time before itself that it treated as historical reality. And then, having given the world its most enduring monuments, it slowly declined, as if the knowledge that produced Giza was not developed there, but inherited, and as if whatever was inherited was never fully replenished. The sand has covered whatever came before. The question of what that was remains the oldest unanswered question in the history of human civilization, buried not in mystery, but in plain sight, waiting beneath everything we thought we already knew. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.